In your first year in office, you had to hike a tax, and I think Kean proposed one tax increase, a gas tax
in the first budget,
and the legislature turned around and made him hike the income and the sales tax, or one of the two. They rejected the gas tax.
Our first budget was $188 million in the deficit. That was a lot of money in those particular days. As best we could put the budget, I could put the budget together with the people from Budget and Accounting. This is before we created OMB. We proposed a dedicated 5-cent gas tax to fund transportation projects, which now is a byword. We were unable to get the votes necessary to pass that, and I failed by one vote. Passed it in the Assembly, and we lost it in the Senate because the Republicans wouldn't put any votes up, not the Democrats. And the Corman Recchio and John Russo would not post the bill unless we put up like 6 Republican votes. And the Republicans were one vote light on a Monday. By the time they came back on Thursday, they were worried about passing a tax, and there's no tax position. So we lost the gas tax. So we had to cut government, significantly reduce the size of various programs, which we did. And we did it through the line item veto when the budget was passed. And we did something else very significant. I got together with Mike Cole, who was still in the AG's office, and we crafted a line item veto package where we line item vetoed every particular and specific type of appropriation that you can do, knowing that that would aggravate Alan Karcher significantly enough that he would file suit against us to overturn us in abusing our line item veto power. The case is now referred to as Karcher v. Kean. And it's a seminal case on the power of the governor to line item veto language in the budget. If you have an appropriation that says you shall not spend any money on this project, we can scratch off the not and say you shall appropriate. Which means it gave us the ability to rewrite that budget literally and structure the spending programs for the state the way we want. We won that case in the Supreme Court. What winning that case did was allow us to reduce the budget the way we wanted to reduce it. We thought we had to from a priority perspective, which ran right into the Democrats' face. And by December 31st of our first year, they were trying, we had called the legislature back into session to deal with certain shortfalls and program problems. And we had ordered them back, which the governor has the right to do. They'd come in, object, and walk out. They'd convene, leave. There was a battle going on between us and the Democratic legislature about modifications to our taxing policy and our spending policy that we thought were significant. We had commissioned various studies about our taxing structure in New Jersey and what affected our economy and what didn't affect our economy, and what taxes, if they were passed, would affect us and what taxes wouldn't. So we had a standing to know how we were going to affect our economic growth. Ultimately, by about 4 a.m. on December 31st, I arrived at a deal with the legislature that the governor reluctantly said he would sign, that modified about 8 or 9 taxes, reduced a couple, but raised others, all in conformity with this study, these economic studies, about what would affect the economy and what wouldn't. If you raise the sales tax above a certain amount, you lose money. We knew what all those numbers were, and that was what the real debate was. If they wanted to restore the dollars, we would listen to them, but they would have to do it within the confines of this definition that we had laid out.
As I recall, I think you had to hike the top limit on the income tax a little bit, or
sales tax.
On the sales tax.
We did not change the income tax.
You did not change the income tax.
And there was estate taxes we reduced, some taxes that we increased. There was a package, and I don't remember all the details of it, but I do remember it passing at the end of the. And Tom, this is a debate that Tom and I had. I was communicating with the legislature for months now. And things we'd accept and we wouldn't. And there was a really solid give and take on that. There was finally an agreement. I remember Chris Jackman was one of our go-betweens, as a matter of fact, in the legislature, and he eventually passed out, and they took him out in his stretcher and brought him back. And oh, it was a wild night. I had 102 temperature. I had the flu that night. And Tom came in the final analysis. We passed the bills at 8:30 in the morning. We had stopped the clock because various taxes, alcohol, cigarette taxes were part of it, that took effect on January 1st. And I'll never forget sitting in the assembly chambers, and I had talked to Willie Brown. Now, Willie Brown was an ardent objector to the sales tax, being from Newark. He had a whole lot of philosophical. I said, Willie, we've been doing this for 4 months. I got a fever. Don't get up on the floor and say anything. And I don't know if you remember the assembly chambers, a little bench in the front of the speaker's podium. I'm sitting on the bench, waiting for this vote to finish. They called for various people to speak, and it had all been orchestrated at that point. And Willie raised his hand and gave a 30-minute dissertation on the sales tax. I went up to him later, and he smiled back at me and he said, I couldn't help myself. He said, I couldn't. Kind of the atmosphere that was going on at the time. There was a knowledge that we had arrived at an agreement, not one that everyone was happy with. We took the bills back to Tom. He had been sitting in the office all night, and he went out and had a press conference. He held his nose and signed the bills.
I remember that.
Because he objected in that political environment to raising those taxes or taxes other than very specific ones for projects like the gas tax. But he said he would sign them as a matter of compromise with the legislature. And he did. And it was part of that ongoing give and take we always had with Alan Karcher and John Rousseau and Carmen Orecchio.
I can't remember whether he literally held his nose or whether he said, I'm signing this while holding my nose.
No, he held his nose. He actually held it. He actually held it.
That must have been a picture in the papers the next day.
Yes, it was. And you know, he really had meant it.